Hi, I'm Alina Arsenal, and today I'm going to be analyzing Chapter 25 of the American Like Me book, which was written by Laurie Hernandez. A little bit about the author. She's a 21-year-old Olympic gymnast, and she's American-born, but she was a second-generation Puerto Rican who greatly values her family and her heritage. She won an Olympic gold and Olympic silver medal and was the youngest ever champion of Dancing with the Stars, all at the age of 16. First, we're going to look at the text in terms of how an author's purpose, audience, speaker, and situation affects what they write and how they write it. Laurie's purpose was to tell about her own personal experiences and to teach the audience about her history, as well as to teach life lessons through these experiences. Her audience can be seen as the general public or specifically young Hispanic Americans like her. She's a young Latina and she's able to understand what American immigrants go through, and therefore, as the speaker, she's able to reflect directly on this situation. She is someone who has had great successes as an Olympic gymnast, and she's telling her own personal story. The text begins with a juxtaposition of her ages and aspirations at different stages of her life to show not only how much she has accomplished, but how young she really was when what she describes as her lifelong dreams coming true. She uses emojis, both mentioned and described in the text, and actual emojis in the text, to have a consistent visual and to further emphasize her emotions. This, along with specific diction and phrasing, shows that the text is very casual and conversational. She creates very visual pictures of her life experiences through the stories she tells, and this allows the audience to understand exactly how she was feeling in that situation. She italicizes specifically chosen words to emphasize them in a sentence. When she says, "I wasn't upset," and italicizes the word upset, she is visually showing how the word should sound and its meaning in the sentence. In the green section, she is establishing her relatability with the audience by describing herself as just a girl. As a celebrity figure who has won Olympic medals, she's pretty alienated from her audience, and describing herself as a child brings her off that pedestal and appeals to her audience. In the pink section, she is setting up the theme of dancing that she uses to relate to her family and their values throughout the entire text. By mentioning specific Spanish artists, she is appealing to Hispanic audiences who can relate to the feelings she is describing there. As stories about one's own life can get emotionally draining, she cleverly uses humorous stories sprinkled throughout the text to lighten the tone of her story. Personal insights also add to the intimacy of her language and her storytelling. When Laurie tells the audience directly about what she's thinking or her own reflections on a situation, she is drawing them closer and allowing them to trust her. This will then allow her to accomplish her purpose and teach life lessons to a more willing and trusting audience. Including the line in purple also uses a pathos appeal and shows how much her relationship with her grandmother means to her, and she will be referencing back to this in the rest of the text. Continuing on, she uses an emotional appeal to sentimentally comment on how her grandmother has helped her to where she is today. Then, comparing her past and present self, Laurie is highlighting how, despite her accomplishments and changes she has gone through, some things are still the same, like her curly hair. Using the ethos of her grandma after describing her character, Laurie teaches her audience a life lesson to do what you want to do without regard for others' judgments. The story about her and her classmate serves as an educational moment for her audience, and it highlights how her childhood may have been different because she comes from a family of immigrants. Closing that story off with a happy moment and saying that was really all that mattered contributes to a hopeful tone. Listing these food items when telling about her past can create an image for all of a reader's senses and really make them feel nostalgic about the experiences she's describing. In the yellow, you can see how she is addressing a possible judgment people might have, and she follows this by debunking those judgments and explaining her own point of view in the situation. Again, you can see in pink, she is using italics for emphasis, and then follows this by using lists to build her grandmother's ethos, and using this ethos later to teach life lessons. The author is using overly romantic and descriptive language to tell a story from her childhood, which draws the reader in and makes them more interested. Putting words in italics, like those in other languages, cues the reader that it is emphasized or different. She is saying some words in Spanish instead of their English translations to relate to her Hispanic or Spanish-speaking audience. Again, she is referencing her grandmother's relationship with her to tell about her past and to heighten her grandmother's ethos as a good person, as well as doing so through a humorous story. In this blue paragraph, she is admitting her own faults and regrets to further appeal to the audience. By showing how she is not perfect, she is growing the audience's trust and allowing them to relate to her on a personal level. She's also using this as a teaching moment to tell her audience to embrace the people and experiences around you while they're still there. This conversation about her life regrets can get a bit heavy, so she uses humor in her story to lighten the situation. Listing similar descriptive words altogether, pale, nervous, scared, and almost sick, emphasized how her family was really feeling in that stressful situation. Referring back to her stories about her family loving dancing, she is creating more continuity throughout her text. Then, putting this powerful sentiment from her grandma is a very emotional and personal moment. She repeats it in italics to really let the message sink in and to show her audience that this is what they should take away from her story. Following this powerful statement, she restates what her grandmother said to further explain it and to make sure the audience really understands what she's saying. She then punctuates her sentences with emojis to highlight her personality traits and to bring a vibrant visual to break up the text. The emotional statement highlighted in pink shows a pathos appeal that tributes to her grandmother and their personal relationship. The metaphor of dancing on air and the all-capital letters in the sentence show just how exciting that specific situation was, and it really captures the energy of it. Then she begins closing the essay with a description of her family and what they love, appealing to the ethos of relatability of a family dynamic the audience can understand. She starts the conclusion with a comparison of others' struggles of self-identity to her own confidence in who she is. Her simply existing and having accomplished what she has serves as inspiration for the world around her, and referring back to her grandmother's wisdom, she highlights this. The extremely visual and descriptive flashbacks in blue further tributes to her relationship with her grandmother and how much she really impacted her life. Then, coming full circle, she references the emojis just like she did in the first part of the essay. We're going to finish by looking at overall patterns in the text. She began with a personal story that led into the conversation of the text about identity and her own history. She held a casual and conversational tone throughout and had a pattern of telling a story or a personal anecdote and then following that with what lessons she learned. She used a mostly pathos and ethos appeal, as well as vivid imagery in her storytelling to draw in readers. With continuous references to her family and her grandmother, as well as her family values, she establishes her ethos and allows the audience to trust her.